Hello friends, I am Heidi and welcome to my channel. Are you like me and have a difficult time with throwing away the scraps of your scraps? Or are you one of those sane people that knows when to say enough is enough? Well, if you're like me, I am going to show you what to do with those tiny little scraps. I enjoyed this project a lot. So if you stick around, I'll see you on the other side and we'll get started. If you've made any scrap fabric panels like I've shown you in my earlier videos, and I will put a link to one of those videos up above, you end up having these little pieces left over from the cutaways. And there is really no reason to throw those away. You can actually make a beautiful panel with a very small piece of one of those. And just by adding more to it, but making that the focal point, you can really come up with something gorgeous. These would also make great covers for journals or needle books. There's a variety of things that you could make using just this little technique. I have this little scrap here too, but I think let's do this black and gray and white one. What I do first is I look at the piece that I have and I try and decide, what do I want to see of this piece? How much of it do I want to see? After making that decision, then I go and I cut some strips from some solid fabric. And with this one, I'm going to do black. You could do white, you could do gray, you could even do a bright bold color on here. And so what I've done is I've cut some strips. I cut some 2-inch strips and some 3-inch strips. I took those strips and then I went and pressed them in half lengthwise. And you don't need, a long piece. This 3-inch strip is 10 inches long, and I won't even use all of it. And then this is a 2-inch strip, and that one is 7 inches long. I'm going to offset this panel. I really tend to like that look when it's offset. And I'm going to take my 2-inch strip, take my folded edge, and I'm going to put it against one of my edges on my panel, overlapping a little piece here. And you want to do it about 1/4 inch. You can do it a little less. If you can handle it, do less. You just want to make sure that you're catching it though when you sew it. So I have a little leader right in here. I am doing about a 1/16 inch stitch away from the folded edge of this black strip. And I'm just going to start sewing. And I'm using a 2.5 stitch length. I have gray thread in there so you can see it a little bit, and I'm perfectly fine with that. My stitches are neat. Just going to snip off the end. And I'm going to take that same 2-inch strip that I have folded in half. Gosh, it's hard with black to see which is folded and which is the raw edge. There we go. You could actually go and take your rotary cutter and your ruler and even it up there. But because this is straight, if you really want this piece to be square in the center, one of the things that you can do is you can take your ruler, line it up with that piece that you put on there. Take your heat erase pen and draw a line. That way your center piece will come out very squared. So I've taken my heat erase pen. It might be difficult to see, but I did make a line that's square with this line here. And I'm going to just lay right over that line. Here's another thing you could do. If you're finding it to be too fussy and small, you can use your glue stick and glue that on, or pin it or clip it, whichever works for you. And I took this strip all the way to the edge of this strip on the back side of it, to that raw edge. I'm gonna go ahead and stitch across this one now. I don't really have enough of this 2-inch strip to use that anymore, but that's okay. I've got my 3-inch strip. Just a matter of deciding how much of this I want to show. I am liking that. Sew that down that side. Now on my other pieces, I I did put these black strips on where I'm doing opposing sides versus going around in a clockwise direction. You can totally do it however you want to do it. If you want to do top, bottom, side, side, do that. I'm just working around on this one. I decided to do something a little bit different. And this is not a quilt. Do it however you want to do it. What you think looks good. All right, so now it's time to put on the bottom panel. So I'm just going to go ahead and overlap this one and sew this on. All 4 of the borders have been sewn on. And it's time to trim those borders as far as how wide they are. On this one, I'm actually going to make the sides and top narrow, but the same size. And the bottom, I'm going to leave wide. So I'm going to go ahead and take that to my cutting board and we'll come back with it trimmed. Here's my piece with the borders trimmed. What I ended up doing as I was trimming it, I kind of saw, just, oh, I like this. So I did this instead. I did trim the 2 sides down to 1/2 inch. The top, I actually left 3/4 inch. And then the bottom is at, let's see, it's 1 inch and 1/8. Kind of like that long, narrow look that's going on there. I'm going to take a scrap piece of my batting, my cotton batting. If you're using Warm and Natural, which is what I have here, you're going to see there's a needle punch side and the side that's smoother. Make sure that you put the needle punch side, which has a little more texture. Make sure you put that facing up, because that's going to ensure that you don't have any little cotton tufts coming up through your piece as you're sewing it. I'm going to go ahead and trim this to be the same size as my piece that I'm working on. I have my batting trimmed to the same size as my piece here. And just a tip, and I learned this from my framing days, is as I'm cutting this, I've actually angled my blade, and I'm actually cutting my batting at an angle. So I'm creating a bevel so that actually the back side of the batting is angling in like this. And what that does helps to ensure that that's not going to show as when I'm trying to finish the edges here. I have a piece of linen here, and you can use whatever you want. This is just what I have, and I'm going to use this piece of linen. If you want to fray your fabric, make sure that you put your fabric panel on with the grain of the fabric so that it's squared and your fray will work out good. I like to leave a nice size border on here because it just helps work on this small piece. So I'm going to go ahead and trim this. And I like to leave enough on the top because I can make decisions later on as far as if I want to use this for making a bail, if it's going to be a piece of jewelry, and this one will be, then I got something to work with. And it also gives me something to hang on to as I'm doing my free motion quilting. I'm going to make sure my piece stays put. So I'm going to baste it on, put my stitch at 3.5, straight stitch. And I'm just going to run this through and baste around the edges 1/8 inch away from the edge. I do have my piece basted on. I've changed my stitch length to 3.0. And I'm going to just stitch around the inside frame and probably go across this ditch right here. And probably this one here too. I just want to, I like, before I do free motion quilting, and even though this is small, don't have to worry about it so much. I just feel like it gives it a little bit more dimensionality and helps everything to stay put while I'm working on it. Here is where you can decide what's going to work for you. This is a great opportunity if you do embroidery, to do some hand stitching and just go crazy with all your little fancy embroidery stitches. And I may end up doing that with this, but I think what I'm going to do first is I am going to put my free motion quilting foot on and do a little work on it with that. And then I think I will do some hand embroidery. I'm not going to actually show doing that. This isn't a tutorial about how to do embroidery or how to do free motion quilting. I'm just going to show you the process of making this. And then how you decide to do the stitching, that's up to you. I do have my piece all stitched, and I did a combination of both. I machine stitched all this part here, and then this looped part on this edge over here I did by hand. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim my edges, my two sides and my bottom edge. I'm going to trim to about 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch. We'll see how big I end up doing it. And then I'm going to leave at least 1.5 inches on the top so that I have enough to make a bail for my necklace. I ended up trimming the sides flush with the black fabric. I did leave 1/4 of an inch on the bottom and 1.5 inches on the top. I have now set my machine to a zigzag stitch. I'm at a 2.0 stitch width and a 1.8 stitch length. I'm going to go all the way around all 4 edges one time with a piece of felt on the back side. This stitch is mostly just to attach the felt. And I do have the felt overlapping all the edges, and we'll trim that down once we get the first stitch done. I have the zigzag stitch done all the way around, and now I'm just going to trim as close as I can to the stitching without cutting the stitching. I ended up changing my mind on this particular one. I don't know, for some reason this one just feels like it shouldn't have fringe on it. So as far as the fabric fringe. So I went ahead and I trimmed off the bottom, and this will disappear once I do the final zigzag stitch. But what I did is I actually trimmed 1/4 of an inch off the top fabric here, and then I actually pressed it down 1/4 of an inch. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring that down so that overlaps that zigzag stitch. And then when I do my next zigzag stitch, this will get caught in that clip there to hold it down. And this loop will be my bail. I am decreasing the stitch length from 1.8 to a 1.0. Actually, no, I think I'm going to do a 1.2. And then I'm increasing my stitch width on the zigzag from 2.0 to 2.5. And again, I'm going to go around over my previous zigzag stitch. There is the piece all finished as far as all the stitching. And now it's just a matter of detailing this to your specifics. You know, if you want to add beading, whatever it is that you want to do. I will go ahead and add some different elements as far as beading. If you are not a jewelry maker and you do not have jewelry supplies and you do not want to go and invest in a bunch of jewelry supplies, the easiest way to turn this into a necklace without having to do that investment obviously would be just to put a pre-made cord of some sort in through the top bail, and that could be a piece of leather, any kind of cording. Have fun with this, and I'll come back and show you what I've done as far as finishing this up. Here is the finished necklace. I'll show that there. So I ended up doing wire through the top here and hanging beads off of that. One of the things that I did because of the wire being so slippery, I ended up doing some stitching really close to that wire just to keep this piece from shifting back and forth too much. This just slips over the head. It's pretty long. I also have the other one that I finished. Now this one, not as elaborate as far as the beading on the top, but I do have more of a fringe of beads on the bottom. And with these that I showed you earlier, I ended up, because it's kind of Christmassy fabric really, I ended up making these into Christmas ornaments. So I just put a piece of leather in for hanging them, and I'll just make a nice little Christmas ornament. There's that one, and there's that one. So again, you could, make so many other things like a needle book or journals pages or journal cover. Just a fun way of taking your little pieces of leftover scraps and creating something beautiful. I hope this finds you all happy and healthy, and until next time, have a great one. Bye for now.